Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about food webs. Okay, food webs are, well, this right here. This is an example of a food web. A food web shows you all the organisms in an ecosystem and what organisms eat the other organisms. And in doing so, it tells you where energy is going. Okay, so the difference between a food web and an energy pyramid. Remember, in an energy pyramid, it just basically shows you a very simplified version of energy starts at the producer level, and then it gets passed on to the primary consumer, and then the secondary consumer, and then the tertiary consumer, so on and so forth, right? And you lose energy as you go up. And that's a very simple way to look at how energy flows through an ecosystem. But in reality, it's much more complicated than that. Now, this is still true, okay? Energy still does pass from producer to primary to secondary to tertiary, and it loses energy every time as heat, like we learned in the trophic levels video. However, it's not that straightforward. So I'm just going to work through some food web examples with you. So this is an example of a question that you might see on a STAR test. It says, based on this food web, which organisms are direct sources of energy for secondary consumers? So it's not asking who's the secondary consumer in this example. It's asking who are the food sources for the secondary consumer. So who are the food sources for the secondary consumer? Well, once again, we have producers, and then we have primary consumers, and then we have secondary consumers, right? So the organisms in the primary consumer level, they eat the producers. The organisms in the secondary consumer level eat the primary consumers in the one below that. So who's the food source for the secondary consumer? Well, it's primary consumers. So the question is really asking, in this food web, who are the primary consumers? Well, what do the primary consumers eat? They eat producers, okay? Where are the producers? That's the first thing. We've got to find out where the producers are. So producers are on a terrestrial ecosystem, those are the plants, right? Those are the things that take the energy and convert it into chemical energy for food. So on land, when we're talking about land, this is plants, right? So here's a producer and here's a producer. I'm going to put a P next to the producers, okay? So who are the primary consumers? Well, the primary consumers are the organisms that eat the producers, okay? In other words, the animals that eat plants, or also known as herbivores. So where are the primary consumers? Well, these arrows will show you the flow of energy. So the easiest way to think about this is that the energy is going to go from the plants, this producer here, and it's going to go into the grasshopper or into the rabbit or into the mouse when those things eat the plant. So the arrows in a food web always point toward the eater. Arrows always point toward the eater. So who is the eater of this plant? Well, there's the rabbit. I'm going to put a 1 next to the rabbit because the 1 means it's a primary. That's what primary means, is first, right? So I'm going to put a 1 next to the mouse. I'm going to put a 1 next to the grasshopper because this points toward the eater of the plant, right? So the grasshopper is an eater of this plant. I'll put a 1 there. Berries, already got a 1 for grasshopper. Who's the eater of the berries? The bird, so that's a primary. The butterfly, that's a primary. This aphid, that's a primary. Okay. So remember, the question was asking, Who was the source of food for the secondary consumers? That was the primary consumers. We had to find out who the primary consumers were, and we just did that. The primary consumers are the organisms that eat the producers. We found out who the producers were, and then we found out who the eaters of the producers were by following the arrows, because the arrows always point toward the eater. And we saw that all these guys are all primaries. Now I could keep going and I could add a 2 next to the eaters of the ones, because those are secondary consumers, right? Secondary consumers eat primary consumers. So if we find a primary consumer and we follow the arrow, it will point toward the eater of that primary consumer, like this ladybug, making the ladybug a secondary consumer. So I put a 2. Same thing with the frog, same thing with the snake, so on and so forth. We'll do more of that coming up, but we found the answer to this question. We found the primary consumers: aphids, butterflies, birds, grasshoppers, mice, and rabbits. So I got to walk away to scroll down to the next one. All right. So this question asks, which table correctly classifies these organisms? So I'm not going to go through all the answer choices with you. I'll let you do that whenever you look through this, or you can just watch me do this. But what I want to do is I just want to label the producers, the primaries, the secondaries, the tertiaries, okay? So remember, the producers are always going to be plants, if you're talking about on land anyway. So we've got a producer there, it's a water oak and a longleaf wood oak, that's a plant. And the producers are typically always going to be on the bottom too. Now, this is on the bottom, but that's ants. Ants are not producers, right? So just because it's on the bottom doesn't necessarily mean it's a producer. It's just it's going to be a plant and typically going to be on the bottom, okay? So the things that eat the plants, remember, the arrow always points toward the eater. So whatever points from the producer is going to be a primary. So ants are an eater. Beetles are an eater of water oaks. These mice are an eater. These gray squirrels are an eater of them. The white-tailed deer are an eater of them, just like them. And the field sparrows are an eater of these guys. Okay. Now, who's the secondary? Well, secondary consumers are eaters of the primary consumers, right? So we follow the arrow to find the eater. Who's the eater of this primary? The striped skunk. Is it 2? Still a 2 because they eat ants. And points towards the milk snake, which is a 2. Where's another one pointing away? Field sparrows, 1.2. Okay. Still the same. All right. So what about the great horned owl? Okay. Oh, one thing real quick. You see these milk snakes? They also eat striped skunks. So skunks are a 2, which would make milk snakes a 3, because 3s eat 2s, right? But the snake has already been labeled as a 2. Well, that's because organisms can be in multiple levels, okay? That's why the reality of food webs is much more complicated than what the energy, the trophic level pyramid would make you think it is. It's not a clean line from bottom to top. It's all mixed together in a web, okay? So you can be in multiple levels at once, just like people. This great horned owl eats these snakes. So since the snake is a 2 and a 3, that means the owl is a 3 and a 4, okay? The owl is a 3 because he eats the snake, which is a 2, but if the snake is a 3, It can also be a 4. The owl can also be a 4. The red-tailed hawks, same thing. Just depending on the circumstances, they could either be a 3 or a 4 because they also eat the same snakes. So if the snake in this specific situation was a 2, then that would make the hawk a 3. But if the snake was a 3, it would make the hawk a 4, right? Okay. So that will give you the answer to the question there. Erase this. All right, this question is, which organisms are both secondary and tertiary consumers in this food web? In other words, which organisms are 2s and 3s? Well, again, let's start with the producers. Let's put a P next to the producers. We've got bacteria. These bacteria, those are the 2 producers, okay? The primaries, the 1s, are going to be eaters of the P's, right? So who's the eater of this P? This producer. Follow the arrow points towards the eater. Okay, this plankton is a 1, this amphipod is a 1, this tube worm is a 1, this mussel is a 1. And if this is a 1, that means the things that eat them are 2s. So this is a 2, that's a 2, this is a 2, this is a 2. This is a 2, and that's a 1. Okay. So now we can go here to the 2 level and see who are the eaters of the 2s. Well, these are the 2s. Let's start with this 2. Who's the eater of this 2? This is a right here. And this is also an eater of the 2, so making that a 3. Right? Then this is also a 2. Oh, you know what? Sorry, mussels. We forgot to do mussels. An eater of the mussels, which mussels are a 1, making octopus is also a 2, right? So we already know that octopuses and ratfish are both secondary and tertiary consumers. So those are the 2. All right, which of these organisms are in a trophic level that receives a larger percentage of the energy or has more energy than the percentage received at the bat's trophic level? So that's kind of worded kind of weird. What they're asking is, which organisms in this food web have more energy in their level than whatever level the bats are at? So we know that there's going to be more energy in the level below the bats. So whatever level the bats are, we're looking for the energy level below that. So if bats are a 3, we're going to be looking for 2s. If bats are a 2, we're going to be looking for 1s. Okay. So again, let's find the producers. Producer, producer, producer. Who are the 1s? The eaters of the producers. Who are the eaters? The arrow points to the eaters. Eater of P is a 1. 1. 1 here. Okay. This producer, 1, 1, and 1. This producer, 1, 1, and 1. Okay, we're going to go all the 1s. Now, let's keep going. We got to find out what the bats are, remember? So, well, there's the bat right there. And what does he eat? Bats eat a 1, right? Eater of this 1 is the bat, which makes the bat a 2. Okay, so now we know that bats are in level 2. So we're looking for an organism that's in the trophic level that has more energy than a 2, which is a secondary consumer. What has more energy than a secondary consumer? It's a primary consumer. Remember? Producers down here, primary consumers, and secondary consumers. Okay? Primary consumers have more energy. So we're looking for primary consumers who are the ones. So who are the ones? Ground squirrel, insects, and pronghorn. Those are the ones. And the last one we're going to do. Which of the following lists only organisms that are secondary consumers in this food web? Okay, so we're just looking for secondary consumers. I'm sorry, I said last one. There's one more after this one. Sorry. So here we go. Plants are the producers, right? Obviously, they're the only producer in this ecosystem. Let's find the ones. Ones are the eaters of the pea, the producers, right? One, and one. Secondaries are eaters of the primaries. So follow the arrows to find the eaters. Let's start with this one. This is an eater. This is an eater. This is an eater. This is an eater. Let's go to this one. Here's an eater. There's an eater. He's already at 2. He's already labeled. And there's another arrow. Okay. Okay. 2. Already got it. Already got it. Already got it. Okay. 2, 2, and 2, 2. Okay. Already got all the 2s labeled. All right. So where are all the 2s? The 2s are the foxes, the hawks and owls, insectivorous birds, snakes, predaceous insects, spiders. So which answer choice lists only organisms that are on this list of foxes, hawks and owls, insectivorous birds, spiders, predaceous insects, and snakes? And that's the answer to that one. So here is the last one. This is the actual last one, okay? So one other thing you need to know is that when you affect one part of the food web, it has an effect on all the other parts of the food web as well. Even though the 2 things may seem unrelated, it still affects them. I'll show you what I mean here in just a second, okay? So this says the populations of which organisms will most likely increase as a result of a disease that suddenly reduces the population of the Texas horned lizards. So a disease comes through and the horned lizards die. A lot of horned lizards die. Okay, so their numbers go down. So we're just going to draw a down arrow to represent the fact that these horned lizards, they're going down. Their numbers are going down. So if the horned lizards go down, there's going to be less of them, which means that there's going to be less food for the organisms that eat them. So if they go down, the things that eat them, their eaters, will also go down. So who's the eater? This guy, he's going to go down, and he's also going to go down because there's less food for them to eat. So of course they're going to starve to death. Now, however, the things that the horned lizard eats will go up. Why? Because there's less horned lizards around to eat them. So they're not being eaten as much. Therefore, their numbers are going to go up. So the things that they eat will go up. And if the things that they eat go up, the grasshopper and the ants, guess what? The things that they eat will go down. So if there's more grasshoppers, if grasshoppers eat grass and there's more grasshoppers, that means there's going to be more grass being eaten. So the grass is going to go down. So a disease that came through and killed horned lizards eventually led to a decrease in the amount of grass. And you may think that a horned lizard and grass have nothing to do with each other, but they do. Everything is connected in some way. But the question was, what will most likely increase as a result of this? Well, who's going up? Ants are going up. Grasshoppers are going up. And that's the answer. All right. I hope you guys learned a little bit about food webs and how organisms interact with each other, and an impact in one area could lead to a change in all the other areas as well.